Hey Matt, today you have interesting analysis about BadRabbit. Could you able to walk through some of the interesting features you found, and why not drive us through your story?
Sure. BadRabbit came out last week. It was a ransomware campaign, and I'm going to put a big asterisk next to ransomware as well, because it seems like some people are starting to think this is destructive malware masquerading as ransomware. Like the intent was always to take systems down instead of extort money. But it seems to be related in certain ways to the NotPetya ransomware that we saw a while back.
Okay.
Now, NotPetya spread primarily using the Eternal Romance bug. It's still within this malware, BadRabbit, but apparently the primary way of spreading was a number of compromised websites. Okay. So these websites, which tended to be .ru, .ua, Russian or Ukrainian sites, people would be going to a regular website they were used to using, and it would pop up and say, hey, you got to update Flash, and who hasn't seen that before? So people would install it, get infected, their machines would start to spread the malware on their local network using a couple of tricks, and eventually it would encrypt their files, reboot their machine, and tell them you've got to pay some bitcoins. It seems to target almost exclusively Russian and Ukrainian targets. At that point, it would show you a message after rebooting and saying, hey, we've encrypted your stuff. Go to this .onion website, pay us this much Bitcoin. Turned out to be around $277 US worth of Bitcoin at the time. Okay. The similarities to NotPetya are what really makes it notable. And it's interesting to note that there was a bit of profiling code on those compromised websites, that it would copy information about the machine that I had just visited, and then somehow, and we're not sure what decisions were made, either provide the malicious payload or not provide it. And my guess is maybe there was something in it that said, is this machine located in Russia? That would make some sense. And it seems that the guys who put this together, not only are they sharing code and methodologies with NotPetya, they also spent a lot of time planning it. Apparently, the compromised websites were compromised for several months.
There are some reports it started somewhere in last year, 2016. So in that sense, basically the authors, whoever is behind it, they took some time to basically build something very robust and try to propagate it.
So whoever planned this compromised those websites far in advance, and then decided all at once to spread the ransomware this way. Which sounds like it's either very, very well organized, or well organized and possibly state-sponsored. That was some people's take on it. There is so much analysis available about this. So I recommend, if you're interested in knowing exactly how this thing works, you could probably get a step-by-step of the lines of the code at this point, of what each portion of the code does.
I mean, there seems to be some, like a discrepancy, whether it's using, Eternal Blue or not. Do you have any take on it? What's the latest information? One day somebody's saying it's using, other day you read another article. It's not.
Typically when you have something that's this big, I mean, it wasn't worldwide like WannaCry, but it was big enough that there's a lot of competing analysis. Everyone's rushing to try and find out what this thing is doing. Sometimes things get missed. I think they found like a modified version of the Eternal Romance exploits within the code.
But I guess the question I would say is I mean, when you do get infected with this, I mean, what's the solution?
That's the difficulty. In most cases with ransomware like this, the only option that you have is either to restore from a backup, or, and I don't want to advise that people do this, or to get your files back, you may actually have to pay the ransom. Now, I haven't heard of anybody actually paying the ransom on this one, so I don't have any indication as to whether or not that payment method works. It's actually pretty interesting. If you take a look at the website that was set up to receive the payments, that you're supposed to go to this .onion site and show up, it looks very flashy. Like, it looks like someone took the time to make it look like it was there to decrypt your data. Like, when you go to the website, the text on the page appears encrypted, and then it decrypts itself, all like Hollywood-like. And I'm like, this is weird. Like, who bothers to do this? Unless you're trying to convince people that this is actually what's going on, is that it's some sort of legit decryptor. Or maybe someone's a real showman, I don't know. But again, I don't have any evidence that the decryptor actually works the way it was promised. But since there was a lot of suspicion around NotPetya that it was really destructive malware masquerading as a for real ransomware, people are extending that same suspicion towards BadRabbit in this case. So I wouldn't be surprised.
So Ganesh, I hear you have an interesting story about the ransomware marketplace.
Yes, John. I have today also another interesting story related to ransomware. This time, actually, the report about a research paper about Ransomware Economy. The study has been done by Carbon Black, They gave some statistics, very interesting statistics. They compared last year, 2016 to 2017.
This Carbon Black report has some statistics on how this marketplace has grown in the last year by leaps and bounds, the number of people involved, the number of different types of malware involved.
According to the report, basically, we are hearing so many ransomware now, right? Just now you talked about one BadRabbit.
Yep.
It's also one type of ransomware. We also heard about CryptoLacker, and you talked about NotPetya, and we know about Locky, GoldenEye, CryptoLacker. These are all actually made news in the year of 2017. The primary point which interests to me is from 2016 to this year, the increase in the ransomware is about 2,500% times. They have some numbers. I think the market value for ransomware market in 2016 was about 250K. 2017 jumped up to 6.2 million.
Wow.
So that's how they came with 2,500 times in increase.
Did they say if that's because there's simply more players in the market or because the ransom that they're asking for are higher? I mean, did they back that up and say why that change occurred?
The prime reasons are, basically supply and demand. The typical malware author, and malware author in the sense I mean to say, the ransomware author makes about 100K per annum, whereas the typical software developer makes about $59,000 to $60,000. Most malicious actors wants to do it because why? Because it's very easy to set up. There's a very high probability of profits gaining from it. With no knowledge, no coding knowledge, anything, we talked about in one of the episodes, you can get just an app and you can start your own ransomware campaign. Due to prevalence of a lot of these factors, I think there's a lot of increase in this one. I think two more important factors to increase is probably prevalence of uses of Bitcoin.
Okay, yeah.
So there's basically no trace back. Once the payment has been done, it's gone, right? And the use of Tor, I think now they are heavily using the Tor to, basically hide themselves, from, analysis and other stuff.
Right, it makes it much harder to trace back who's actually behind that ransomware if the payment mechanism is done entirely through Tor and using Bitcoin. I agree.
Yeah, they said in 2016, the payments of ransomware amounts in dollar amount was about 1 billion, which was about 24 million in 2015, the year before. Even there's a huge increase in it.
You got to wonder that much money that's being spent on it. If you were able to if you were to take that kind of spending and then just ask everyone to make a single, external hard drive backup of their stuff, they'd be able to, let's think about this. People would be able to get their data back.
It's probably worth $1 billion just to back up everybody's data, right? There's a business maybe there.
Maybe there is, but honestly, I'd much rather see the money spent in that way instead of to cyber criminals. I think we'd agree on that.
I think the one reason is because people are paying the ransoms. They're getting encouraged to, basically proliferate with more variants of ransomware.
And the more people were willing to pay these ransoms, it just encourages crooks to do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is kind of surprising to me. The price point for the ransomware, the typical ransomware, ranged from 50 cents to $3,000.
50 cents.
50 cents.
Wow.
But the median price is around $10.50. It's so tempting. Anybody can go and buy for such a small price. And maybe that's one of the contributing factors to see 2,500% jump from last year to this year. If you look at the underground of Ransomware Economy report, they have a tiered structure. Basically, I think the most of the levels they have is tier 3. Like any organizations, you have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. In this case, tier 1 is the author. Author is supposed to be who actually created and developed the ransomware malware. And the next level, they will have actually the ransomware as a service. Basically, the author decided to, instead of hosting everything, it kind of basically give it to somebody to take care of campaigning wise. But he provides the technical excellence. But they will have a revenue sharing. Like they will come up with some terms, I'll get such a share of whatever the ransomware revenue you get it. But he will handle the only basically the part of a technical part of it. But the distributors, what they will do, they will come up with different plans, maybe spam campaigns, exploit kits. The least tier in this one is basically, I think they're called, I believe, distributors. distributors basically, they could be buying from the first two tiers. Their only goal is to spread as much as they can the ransomware.
Okay, so these are the guys who might handle the spam campaigns or like posting links on forums or anywhere that you would get that ransomware in the first place. That's their responsibility.
I think they will get the directions from the top up, basically either from the, I believe in this case would be distributors.
Okay.
They will tell you, you have to take care of spam campaign, maybe, another, exploit kit, and they will do it, they try to give, as much, expansion for this ransomware.
Got it.
I think anybody is interested, actually, Carbon Back has a PDF.
Cool.
And they put it on the internet, and it's a good read, actually, and at the same time, it's scary.
Yeah, wow. So, John, let's talk a little bit about that key reuse attack, that KRACK attack in WPA2 that I heard about last week.
Yeah, this is an interesting man-in-the-middle vector that relates to a vulnerability that some researchers found in the WPA2 handshake. In that handshake, they basically say, "Hey, I'm you, you're me," type thing, and then
I'm you and you're me. That's a terrible way to start.
So, you just say, "We're gonna," well, at least we established that initial handshake that lets us know that we're the session. We're going to keep that communication going, and in that handshake, there's no encryption, right? It's no real secret sauce right there. It's just handshake, but there is some passing of keys, and what the researchers found is that either those keys are guessable, or and the key here is what's called a non, or it's not even random. Sometimes they're supposed to be random, or they can be random, but there's no real requirement to do that. And so there's a basic problem with WPA2 in that if you can guess that non, if you can guess that key and reuse it and reinstall it, reinstallation, you can essentially jump in the middle of a Wi-Fi session. There's always a problem with Wi-Fi man-in-the-middle. I mean, we've said that on this show several times in the past. We're going to continue to say it, in the future. There's Wi-Fi man-in-the-middle attacks are relatively common. In this case, we have a new vector where it's a little bit less detectable because you're not having to forge a certificate, but it is still a vulnerability. Some of the key elements here, of course, like I said, you're not breaking encryption. So if you have like a Wi-Fi session that has a VPN in it, or you're doing a HTTPS SSL session, you're still encrypted in that connectivity.
Right. So this removes the protections that WPA2 provides.
Correct.
But anything underneath that, encryption will still work, but someone could still tamper with or replace traffic, except hopefully your underlying encryption, your VPN, your SSL will take a look at that, and the protocol will fail to work at that point. And you'll say, something is up, somebody's messing with my packets, right?
Well, or some other indication. You can have some indications that, that somebody's on that session with you. A great example is back, when we were talking Poodle, you'd see the lock key, like on your browser. You think you may be connected to your bank or whomever. That lock key wasn't a lock, right? It was open. You think, well, wait a second. If I have a clean HTTPS certificate session, that lock should be there. Well, that's the same problem here. It's a man-in-the-middle vector. That's really what it boils down to. There are no active attacks. There are no active exploits using KRACK right now. Known instance in the wild. It's just kind of joins that crowd of man-in-the-middle vectors. The real uniqueness of it is that it's a WPA2 protocol issue. It's not just can I forge a certificate? Can I get in the middle of the session some other way? It's actually at that very low level protocol.
This is a fundamental flaw in the protocol. This has nothing to do with whether it's on it's not Windows specific, it's not Android specific, it's WPA2, the standard by which all these implementations abide to. That's where the flaw is.
Anything Wi-Fi enabled is the problem here. Or not. I shouldn't say problem is a hard statement to say, right? It's a protocol. It's a basic level, below normal, interception. It's actually at that how the road's laid, right? It's that line in the road is now over here when it should be here. But there's still a road.
John, do you have any recommendations to for this specific flaw? Use of VPN?
Yeah, no. and that's the thing is like you said, this impacts every Wi-Fi device, access points, clients, whatever. It's the recommendations are really still the same ones that you have, like with other normal Wi-Fi man-in-the-middle type things. Is patch, patch, right? We can't harp on that enough. If you're on a public Wi-Fi for some reason, it's just common practice. You don't do sensitive stuff on public Wi-Fi. So if you're in an apartment complex or you're in a house that's near other houses, you got to be aware that Wi-Fi connection can be, pretty wide.
This is one of those bugs that may linger for a while simply because not everything gets patched on a reasonable schedule.
If the users are up to date with the patches, and if you're using VPN, the users will be protected from this one. Hey, John, I think you have a quiz for us today, another interesting one you came up with for us.
I always try to give you quizzes. Some of them are harder, some of them are easier. In this case, what I did is I picked up 4 statements that I've actually have heard in conversations, and I thought, okay, let's just see, what do you think? Are they really true? Are they not true? And so it's a little bit of a quiz, but it's also a little bit of, let's hit some of that popular myth, that may be out there in the wild.
The Markley Quiz was good this week. It wasn't just a simple, facts or like a multiple choice guess. It was more of a, what's wrong with this picture?
So the first one is one I just read. This is probably the most recent one I've heard. It was, my application uses SHA-2, therefore our data is encrypted.
What? No. That was easy.
No? Why do you say no?
Because SHA-2 is a hashing algorithm. It's not an encryption algorithm.
Correct.
Great if you're trying to store passwords, maybe it's appropriate. I wouldn't call it, done. There's other hashing algorithms you should consider as well that are probably better. But no, that's not the same as encryption, not by a long shot.
Yeah, but again, I just heard this probably in the last week.
Oh, well.
All right, so good points there. Here's the next one. My router access list limits access to TCP ports 80 and 443, so only HTTP and HTTPS are permitted.
You want to take this one, Ganesh? I know what I'm going to say.
Okay, go ahead.
You sure?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, because it doesn't tell you what's going on in the application layer. So anything can go over those 2 ports. I mean, I could push SMTP over that port. I could push a custom protocol over those ports. Unless you're looking at what's actually going over it, you're not preventing anybody from misusing those ports.
So here's the third one. This one's maybe a little different, but again, something I've heard. So let's see if you think it's real or not real or accurate, I guess. There are 2 types of companies: those that have been breached and those who don't know they have been.
They don't know yet, probably.
I like this one because I think it's that same kind of, it encourages the mindset I want people to have, is that just because you haven't shown that you've been breached, that you shouldn't be worrying about breaches or looking for evidence of breaches. This is a tough one because I know I can see it both ways, because technically there is a possibility that you have not been breached. However, you really need to be proactively looking for it instead of something to fall in your lap. So on a practical level, I'm going to disagree with the statement, but on a philosophical level, I'm going to endorse the statement. Is that okay if I hedge my bets that way?
And I expected to hedge. and that's the way the right answer is. I mean, I think as a security professional, we reiterate that people, you've been hacked, you just don't know it, right? And that's because kind of the sentiment that's being said here is that, the fact that you don't see it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not, that somebody's not in your network. Now, here's the last one. I have nothing important on my computers, so not really concerned over security.
Ganesh, you got to take one, man.
I think this is, I'll say, lack of, security awareness. It does not mean, if you doesn't have anything important on the computer, it doesn't mean it's not being used. It's not the data. Sometimes it's the horsepower you have, how much, memory, how much, storage you have. That's what is used by the bad actors.
I concur. And that was the thing that I actually heard somebody tell me this at a meeting. But I said, well, wait a second. The fact is that you have an asset, a resource that somebody would love to be able to use. maybe not take the data off of it, but use it for their own purpose.
Absolutely.
I always, when somebody says that to me, I always point back to, I think Brian Krebs has an infographic about this, the value of a hacked PC.
Oh, really?
And it shows, I mean, it's probably not a complete list, but it's a very long list of the different things that somebody could potentially use your personal computer for if they had control over it.
True.
That includes things like cryptocurrency mining. That includes using it for DDoS attacks, sending spam. I mean, anything that they would go out and rent a computer to do, that's a criminal action, they could just use yours. So absolutely. And I also have this, this comes up a lot in discussions with developers in development environments where they say, well, it's not a production machine yet. And I haven't put any company information on it, so I'm not going to go through all the steps that I should. And I have to tell them, like, this is the same problem, you know. Just because you don't care about what the data is doesn't mean that it's not valuable to somebody.
So y'all passed the quiz. I mean, it wasn't really a quiz; it was more of a discussion. But I think that these are like 4 topics. Like I said, these were real world examples that I have heard in the last couple months. That I thought, you know, those are things that as security professionals, you know, we need to think about and we need to educate people about.
If you have any more of those, I'd love to discuss those, because I know that I've heard some things in my time too where I'm just like, really? And then I had to sit down and explain people, but you know, it's wild. I would say that some of the answers are a little more gray than black and white, and I kind of appreciate that because it gives you more room to explore the space of that answer. It made me think a little bit about my own opinions on things too, so I liked it. So let's take a look at the internet weather for this week. These are our top 10 most probed ports for the past 7 days. At the top, no surprises here. The top 4 are actually not a surprise. 23 TCP, which is Telnet. 22 TCP is SSH. 1433 is MS SQL.
That's right.
And 445 is SMB. And like I said, no real surprise there. 23.
But for the number 5.
Number 5 is an interesting one. And I think I covered it the last time I was on the show. And that one's actually trending up pretty good. 8545 TCP, I believe to be related to Ethereum, which is a cryptocurrency. We'll talk about that a little bit later. You can see 23 TCP is very close to 50% of the scanning. And that's including all the other. That's 50% of the most probed ports of all of them, which is really incredible.
As usual, port 23 activity taking bulk of the 50%, almost 50% of the activity on the charts.
So the most sources probing is actually an interesting one for this week. 23 TCP in the top, not a surprise really. 445 is most likely related to the ongoing WannaCry eternal blue scanning we keep seeing.
And also you talked about BadRabbit.
We did talk about BadRabbit, that's right. We see a lot of ICMP this week. 3.3 ICMP is up 17 spots. And I know that most of our viewers aren't as familiar. In fact, I'm not very familiar with the ICMP codes. So I've brought a table up. 3.3 is port unreachable, which is interesting.
I think looking at most of the ICMP here on this chart, probably sometimes some sort of attack is going on. The service or resource is not available. In that sense, you kind of see most of these ICMP. It could be related to.
It could be. You're right. It could be that this is some sort of network failure because of the volume of scanning or because of some sort of other network anomaly that's occurred.
Yep.
A lot of the times when you see these coming back in large volumes, it looks like scanning to our algorithms because someone else is scanning a whole bunch of ports. So
that's interesting. You see most of these ICMP together. In the top chart.
ICMP is a protocol that's really used for diagnosing networks. You'll send messages using ICMP for things like pinging a server. Is the server responding? The health of the network kind of information. So 3.3, like we said, is port unreachable. Below that, we have 8.0, which is echo request. 3.1 ICMP is network unreachable. Slightly different from port unreachable, but again, it's some sort of error code saying I couldn't hit where I was supposed to go. 11.0 ICMP is time exceeded, which is we typically call that timeout. So it could be that there's somebody who's trying to traceroute. We see a lot of those because that's how traceroute works, is you keep timing out the TTL. But again, not really obvious, but that's up for since last week.
Actually, the TTL 11, ICMP 11 kind of ties up with your other ICMP codes because the resource is unavailable. Right. It eventually going to timeout.
That's a good point, yeah. At the bottom, we have 0.0 ICMP, which is the echo reply. So that pairs up with 8.0, echo request, echo reply. So a whole lot of pinging going on. A lot of ICMP traffic. I'm curious as to what the cause of that is, but I haven't done the research yet. Maybe that there was some sort of network anomaly causing dropped packets, or maybe some sort of network change. A large scanning campaign, like a significantly large one. So 8545 I mentioned before. I believe it's related to Ethereum. There's a daemon called Geth, which apparently has a known vulnerability from 2015 that if you don't configure it properly, it'll give away the necessary things to access your Ethereum wallet.
Wow.
So basically someone can scan by and make a request. I think it's like either a JSON, RPC, something like that, and ask for it. And it says, yeah, sure, let me tell you. And at that point, you own that wallet. So
Wow.
yeah, so you can see back in August, I think we're seeing around 30 million scan flows per hour. And we're peaking out now around 110, 115 million scan flows per hour.
It's a 4 times increase. The most interesting port for this internet weather, this week's internet weather, is port number 8545. We are seeing increased activities. The scan sources have increased tremendously. I think at least 4 times.
Somebody is seriously interested. And, you know, with the recent interest in cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin in particular, but the other ones as well, people are realizing you can make a lot of money this way. So why not?
And also, you know, most of the, now the focus is on Bitcoin. Ethereum kind of, it's kind of, behind the Bitcoin. It makes sense to, get to those other crypto balances and get the content whatever you could.
Sure. The thing about, I think, this one is that there's a known vulnerability. People can go right after that. With Bitcoin, I'm not sure that there's any known or very prevalent vulnerabilities in the daemons. That's why this one is being stolen this way. I imagine we've talked about other Bitcoin stealing malware that you actually have to get on the system, and run it there and then steal a file off the file system. Here you've got a
You
daemon.
just have to find the system with open port.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. Quick, easy money, and that's it. We talked a lot about ransomware this week, and it's definitely a topic worth discussing. I think people have to take some basic precautions to defend themselves against it. Regardless of what particular variety you're trying to defend against, a backup is a great way to recover from that.